Now, let's move on to the next section. Here, I'll use the question and answer technique. This is the perfect lesson if you want to speak English automatically. Let's see how it works. I'll give you some information, a phrase or two. I'll ask simple questions. After each question, there will be some seconds of silence. It's your turn to answer the question. Just try to give an easy and short answer, not a complex one. After you answer, I'll give you a correct answer. This process will continue, and little by little, I'll be telling a story using questions and answers. Okay, let's get started. Last Christmas, shopping for Christmas gifts had become too exhausting for Granny. Did shopping for Christmas become exhausting for Granny? Yes, shopping for Christmas became exhausting for Granny last year. Was Granny excited or exhausted? Exhausted. Granny wasn't excited. She was exhausted. Granny thought that shopping for gifts was exciting, right? No. Granny didn't think that shopping for Christmas was exciting. She thought it was exhausting. Who felt exhausted, Granny or Mommy? Granny, not Mommy. It was Granny who felt exhausted. When did shopping become exhausted for Granny? Yesterday? Not yesterday. Last year. Shopping became exhausting for Granny last year. So she came up with an idea. She would send checks to everyone in the family instead of buying presents. What did Granny do? Come up with an idea or buy presents? She came up with an idea. Granny didn't buy any presents. Would Granny send checks to her family members? Yes, her idea was to send checks to her family instead of buying gifts. What would Granny do instead of shopping for Christmas gifts? She would send checks to everyone. Who would send checks? Dad? No, not Dad. Granny. She would send checks instead of buying presents. On each card, she wrote, "Buy your own Christmas present," and mailed to her family members. Did Granny write on each card, "I wish you a Merry Christmas"? No, she didn't write, "I wish you a Merry Christmas." Granny wrote, "Buy your own Christmas present." Was it Mom who mailed the Christmas cards? No, not Mom. Granny. She mailed the Christmas cards. What did Granny write on each card? She wrote, "Buy your own Christmas present." Who did Granny mail? Her family members or her dogs? Her family members, not her dogs. Her dogs can't read. After the holidays, Granny noticed that she had received very few cards in return. When did Granny notice that she received very few cards? Before or after the holidays? After the holidays. Granny noticed she received very few cards after the holidays, not before. How many cards did Granny receive in return? A few or a lot? A few, not a lot. Granny received very few cards in return. Did Granny receive only a few presents? No. She received very few cards, not presents. What did Granny notice after the Christmas holidays? That she got robbed? No, Granny didn't notice that she got robbed. She noticed that she received very few cards in return. Puzzled, she went to her room and started to write her relatives to ask what had happened. Was Granny certain or was she puzzled? Puzzled. Granny was puzzled. She was really confused, not certain. Where did she go? To her room or the bar? To her room. She went to her room, not to the bar. Did she write her friends or her relatives? Not her friends. Granny wrote her relatives. Why did Granny start to write to her relatives? To ask what had happened. She wanted to know what had happened. But as she cleared off her cluttered desk, she became aware of something terrible. Did Granny clear off her cluttered desk, or did she add more things on the desk? Granny didn't add more things on the desk. She cleared her cluttered desk. Did she become aware of something wonderful or terrible? Not wonderful. She became aware of something terrible. Who became aware of something terrible? Granny. She became aware of something terrible. It turned out that Granny forgot to include the checks with the Christmas cards. What a disaster! Did she forget or did she remember to include the checks? She forgot. Granny forgot to include the checks. What did Granny forget to include together with the Christmas cards? Money or checks? Checks, not money. Granny forgot to include the checks. Who forgot to include the checks? Grandpa? Not Grandpa. Granny. She forgot to include the checks. What a funny story. Last year, Granny wanted to try something new at Christmas. She decided to send checks instead of Christmas gifts. However, after the holidays, she realized that she forgot to include the checks. So, she immediately sent new Christmas cards, and this time she made sure to enclose the checks. Okay, awesome! It's the end of this short lesson. Can you see how many questions you can answer? It's like talking to another person in English. Now, imagine a whole story told this way. It's incredible how much you can learn using this method. Go to courses.speakenglishpodcast.com and continue practicing your spoken English with stories.